Hi everybody, it's Nana Darkoa here, and today I'm with my best male friend. I think you've been promoted. You've come back into your original position.
Wow, this is very epic. Very.
So, Kobina Ankomah-Graham, welcome to Adventures TV.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for agreeing to come on. And I also want to say thank you to Sherry. Sherry is Kobe's wife, for agreeing for Kobe to be on. I had to say to Kobe, let's ask Sherry's permission because we're speaking about marriages. And we're speaking specifically about feminist marriages. I mean, this is a topic I'm super interested and super passionate about. First of all, in general, full disclosure, I have major issues with marriage, just the whole institution of marriage. And yes, I've been married before. I'm also divorced. I don't think that's where my issues come from. I had issues before I got married,
and then they were confirmed.
And they've been confirmed all of the time. Yeah. But like people get married all of the time. Like, why did you decide to get married?
I think I honestly feel I was programmed that way.
Yeah, which I think most of us are, right?
Yeah, so I think I was always going to get married. I think I had a countdown that started around the time I was 8. Yeah.
And what, from the age of 8 you're thinking about getting married?
Yeah. I remember around the age of 8 starting to think about these things and who I wanted to be with and that kind of thing. I was a very weird child.
I think that's actually really kind of sweet because like I feel like as women we're always socialized to think about these things, about getting married, having children, babies. That's why we're given dollhouses. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know guys also thought like that. So I don't know, is this something that guys generally think about? And of course you can't speak for all guys.
I can't speak for all guys. I would say, I mean, it's definitely there somewhere and it comes up all the time. I think there's also pressure that is put on us to marry, but I think maybe it starts later. Mm-hmm. Or I married relatively late by Ghanaian standards. Ghana, I think pressure-wise, it starts maybe in your early 20s, definitely as soon as you leave university. And I remember once I think I crossed 30, everybody just being really concerned. And there are consequences to that, and definitely social consequences. You start to be seen as irresponsible if you don't marry as soon as society expects you to. Mm-hmm. But I decided, being the child of multiple divorces, my parents both married several times. I decided I respect the institution enough to really wait until I'm very, very, very sure. And it took a long time. And I wasn't willing to compromise on my certainty. And so that's why it took so long. And there were social repercussions to that.
I feel like that could be a whole show on its own, right? The social repercussions to not being married in Ghana. So like noting that for the future. But I really want to speak about feminist marriages, right? And you and I have also had discussions recently about now you find it increasingly difficult to like describe yourself as a feminist. But you are the child of a fairly prominent African feminist. And actually, I realize I'm speaking about your mom in the present tense. And for me, this is like the kind of impact she's had in the world, right? So Kobe's mom, for those who may not know, her name was Ifwa Dokunu, a prominent African feminist who did a lot of work to end female genital mutilation worldwide. And Kobe is her son, So really I think just grew up with that feminist spirit.
Yeah, it was definitely in the air.
You had to imbibe the oxygen.
I had to breathe it in. It meant that I guess I had more awareness of feminism and African feminism than a lot of my friends did. Mm-hmm. And so there were certain conversations that I would have with my mom and that kind of thing over time. So I definitely grew up with it. Yeah.
And I know once upon a time you were very comfortable describing yourself as a feminist. And I always say to people ask me, who is a feminist? Right? And I always say a feminist is a person who really understands the politics around feminism, who recognizes that we live in a world which is structured by inequality, part of which is, a system that says men are dominant over women, and are actively trying to change that in whichever way, shape, or form, right? And so for me, if a feminist is a person, a man can be a feminist, a woman can be a feminist, So tell us why nowadays you become a little bit uncomfortable with describing yourself as a feminist.
I think it just comes from coming from a place of listening and also realizing that you have a lot to learn. And so for me, I think even in the past, I've always thought of feminist. If you're a guy, a feminist, I feel feminist is a title that is bestowed on you, if anything. And it comes about by you living a particular way, having your words match your actions in a certain way. And so if people describe you as feminist, cool. But I find that some people put the label on themselves and then proceed to misrepresent it, proceed to abuse it, or even just use it in really nefarious ways, particularly online. And so in that sense, I feel like my thing is I will try and live my life the best way that I know fit. And if people look at that and decide that that's feminist, then it's feminist. And that's going to be my measure. But I'm not going to call myself feminist, with one caveat, particularly in the classroom and particularly in our kind of Ghanaian African settings. When I'm surrounded by boys, sometimes I do make it a point to say feminist and to describe myself as a feminist, just to open their eyes to the idea that it can be.
Like this is what a feminist looks like.
Yeah.
And a feminist can look like you, can also be a man.
Exactly. And so that's something to do with a conversation that my mother and I had about kind of the responsibilities that men have towards boys and the way in which boys look up to men. And so men have to take a particular kind of responsibility. And my mom's argument was essentially that it should be men who should be raising feminists. Whereas my argument at the time was, if we're going to wait for men to raise feminists,
we'll be waiting a damn long time.
We will be waiting.
Which is why women have not been waiting, and why some women, I feel like, kind of understandably get upset when certain men are lauded as male feminists and given a lot of attention and spotlight. And you're like, really? Seriously? Sit down. That's not how an ally behaves.
Exactly.
Yeah. So no, I hear you totally. And so as a feminist, how has that affected how you approach your marriage?
I think just in terms of roles and responsibilities in a really practical sense, that's where it really shows itself. So I think society foists certain responsibilities and roles upon us. So you're the man, you're supposed to do this, you're the woman, you're supposed to do that. And I think it's just approaching things from a more kind of merit basis. So I remember at our wedding, for example, we both talked about, I think we were playing the shoe game. And one of the questions was, who is responsible for cooking in the house?
Yes.
And we both raised our shoe, or we both raised the shoe of the other person.
You have to explain the shoe game.
Okay, so the shoe game, the way it works is the bride and groom face away from each other. So you're both seated and your backs are to each other. And so you both take off your shoes and you both have one each of each other's shoes. So I'm carrying my wife's shoe and my shoe, and she's carrying my shoe and her shoe. So then we're asked a series of questions. Who's going to do the cooking? Who initiated first, etc., that kind of thing. And so if you think it was you raise your shoe, and if it's the other person, then you raise the other person's shoe. And so we were asked who's going to be responsible for the cooking, and both of us raised both shoes. So that's an example. So so the idea being that a lot of these things that get gendered in terms of roles and responsibilities in the household, we try and do it in a more kind of, if not even basis, then in a more kind of meritocratic basis. And that's basically what it is.
And then I also remember that soon after you guys got married, you were telling me about how you both had to go to the bank because you wanted to open up a joint account and put in like a percentage of each person's income, right? And like the staff in the bank were a bit like, what?
Okay, so we decided that we'd seen, I think both of us had seen other marriages from when we were kids, not necessarily our parents' marriages, where things really start to crumble around the idea of money. So we decided we're going to avoid all of that. Both of us had decent jobs. The idea was to open a joint account. And the idea for the joint account was we took our time to note the cost of running our household the way that we wanted. So food in the house, hiring people to do this or that, like having someone come by once a week to clean the place, the cost of looking after our baby, food, etc., etc. So we put that cost together and we divided it into two. And so each one of us had to bring that money and put it into this joint account, which was set up for this specific purpose. And so I went to the bank to set up a direct debit so that every month that amount would go into this joint account. And I remember just being in the bank for a long time having to explain this to the teller because it seemed she wasn't understanding. And I started getting frustrated. And then so I said, what exactly is the problem here? And so first of all, she goes, so let me get this straight. Is this your salary? And I said, yes. And is this your wife's salary? Yes. And this is really your salary? I said, what is this? And then she explained to me that she could never get her husband to disclose his salary. And she would never tell her husband her salary either.
Yeah.
And so this thing that we're trying to do is revolutionary. Yes. And she's just trying to wrap her head around it. And in fact, can she take a picture of this so that she can share it in her WhatsApp?
Oh my goodness.
Which made me really depressed, actually, because I was just like, so how are people operating this? Like, yeah.
Yes. No, it's crazy. It's crazy. So beyond like sharing finances, beyond like trying to have like a more equitable way of like sharing like the responsibility of ensuring that you can eat.
Yes.
Like, like how else would you say you guys are striving for a feminist marriage?
So I would actually emphasize on the word striving.
Yes.
Because I don't think it's a thing where you just decide it and then it just flows. Because there are certain things you have to take into account. So I'll give you a perfect example. The cooking thing. I said, in fact, we said that it is going to be our joint responsibility to do the cooking. And that's because both of us don't see it as any one person's responsibility. Fine. But then the reality of it has been that Shari tends to do more cooking by far. And the reason for that is because in as much as I don't see it as her responsibility, she's a better cook. And
because
so
you didn't grow up cooking.
I didn't grow up cooking.
Oh, and
in fact, so in fact, even adding layers to that, aside from the fact that like I actually I don't enjoy cooking. I find being in the kitchen a real chore. Aside from that, my mother, who is the one who everyone would expect to teach me to cook because
she's a woman.
My mom didn't like cooking, and I'd never really thought about it until I got married. And I just remember my mom used to have like these very like simple things that she would make once in a while. But we did a lot of eating out, my younger brother and I, as kids. And I'd never really sat down and thought about it. And I remember my mother's kind of last companionship. One of the selling points of this guy was, he could cook. He took responsibility for all of the cooking.
It's like a winner.
And so on that side, it's like Shari ends up doing a lot more of the cooking. And so she's constantly trying to push me into the kitchen. And I guess the striving part of it is me overcoming the fact that I don't really like cooking, to take more responsibility for it in order for things to be more balanced. And so it's that kind of thing all the time, particularly now that we have a son. Just making sure that both of us have responsibility. So our routine with our son is, our son sleeps through the night now, thank God. But like at night in particular, he is almost solely my responsibility. So when he wakes up in the middle of the night, I'm the one who will go and check on him, who will go and make sure he has water. When he wakes up first thing in the morning, I will take him and we'll play for maybe an hour to an hour and a half to allow Shari the time to sleep. Because one, Shari doesn't operate well on less sleep, or as well as I do. And then also just to be equitable, because she tends to take a bit more care of him during the day. Even though I feel I do a lot during the day, I feel I can't compete with breasts, for example. And so he's at the phase right now where we're trying to wean him off breasts, and so he's always going to her, you see. So there has to be some kind of balance, and I think we just try and strike that balance. So again, it boils down a lot to kind of roles and responsibilities, and just making it about merit and about fairness. So that we're sharing the burden. Because the way I look at it, the way we tend to look at it is, if a couple shares the burden, they can do everything. But this situation where one person is expected to have a full-time job and then also to have what is essentially a full-time job in the household, it doesn't work, you see. So try and make it work by working together. And it just seems kind of common sense.
And unfortunately, like we all know what they say about common sense, right? But Kobe, this has been really good. So thank you so much for like this conversation. And I hope we can have like more conversations like this.
I'll ask my wife.
Bye, everybody.